Okay, it's 2:30. We'll call to order this regular meeting of council on December the 10th at 2:30 p.m. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet First Nations, of whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Number 3, notice of video recording. Council would like to advise District of Ucluelet staff, audience members, and delegates that this council proceeding is being video recorded and that the recording will be live streamed or subsequently published on the District of Ucluelet's YouTube channel. There is an addition to the agenda. Does everybody have it? There's a second part to that as well. Okay. So, looking for approval of the agenda with 1.1 late agenda item.
So moved. Second.
Seconder, okay. All in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes from November the 20th.
So moved. Second.
Any errors or omissions? Okay. All in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. And looking for adoption of November 26 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? Councillor McEwen.
There's just 2 typos on page 19. Under question period, it should read, in response, council noted that they brought all the cannabis retail applications to the same point in the process, so they could be considered at the same time.
Is that anything else? Is that it? Okay. Okay, all in favor? Mayor's announcements, Steve Lang retired. We had a staff Christmas party, so just a big shout out that Steve Lang is no longer driving around one of the pickups. So he's retired and moved to the Seashell area. Also, for those, just a big thank you to those that went out on the back roads cleanup this weekend. I believe there's 24,000 pounds of debris, and that's debris that's pretty much over the last 12 months. So a lot of these roads are cleaned up annually. Thank you to them. That's all I have to announce at this time. Okay, public input. Open the floor to general comments or concerns from the public. Just ask you to stand at the podium and your name and address. Looks like you may want to speak there, Dan, so it's all yours. You look good.
Well, first, just with respect to the
Just your name and address.
sorry, yeah, Dan Vidova, 1830 Peninsula Road. First thing, the cleanup, the backcountry cleanup, just indicates to me that the province needs to put more money into summertime patrolling of those areas and a little more control. In order to maintain, the environmental standards we need to keep up, both on Ucluelet Nations land, or the First Nations land, and provincial crown land. So I stand here today being a NIMBY, okay, so full disclosure on that. I'm here to talk about the temporary use permit being discussed for the Thornton Motel, okay? And so I want to say that, first of all, I appreciate what council is doing in terms of looking at housing for staff and employees in town, and I realize it's a real challenge. I live right across the street from the Thornton Motel, so I have a personal issue there. I think that management of something like staff accommodations is really difficult. We're dealing with the Landlord's Tenants Act, not the Innkeepers Act. So things in terms of difficulties with tenants move slower than they can with the Innkeepers Act. So I know that there were difficulties in managing the same sort of arrangement at Yuki Lodge, and because of some mischief and misbehavior, it was quickly, sort of shelved as a viable plan. Thornton Motel doesn't offer cooking facilities, It's not meant to house permanent residents. I think that this is going to invite a lot of outdoor cooking, a lot of sort of unsafe sort of things happening on the balconies, etc. These people work hard. I realize that they have a right to wind down and have parties, etc. But that's what I'm afraid of is large, out of control parties, because everybody knows each other and there's friends coming in, and it's a really difficult thing to control. And again, on Main Street, in a facility that's designed to accommodate tourists, of which more and more and more are coming all the time. So we need more staff, but we need roofed accommodation for visitors too. And as the amenities, including the bike path, the brew pub, the Wild Pacific Trail, as they are improved, more and more people are coming here. So shutting down roofed accommodation for visitors seems to me not really a good decision. I think that the operation would perhaps be better served, or the accommodation better served in some place like TRAP or UHS. BlackRock's built some really nice things in town to provide just that kind of infrastructure. And I think that lastly, 3 years is a pretty damn long temporary use permit. So I would think that I have some reservations about that. So I'll conclude by saying thanks for listening. I realize that I do stand justifiably accused of being a NIMBY.
No, I think we're going to be getting into it. Obviously, it's on the agenda tonight, and I think, or shortly here, and we're going to be diving into it. The applicants here as well as the property owner, to talk about some of your concerns that you mentioned, and just to try to be neighborly. And I think I'm hoping that you'll be pleased with some of the answers. And so we're going to dive into that here shortly.
Okay.
But you're definitely been heard. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public like to see? There's a possibility, yes, sir. Okay. Delegations, we got 3. We're going to start with Rebecca Hurwitz from Clayoquot Biosphere Trust. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me. My name is Rebecca Hurwitz from the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust, and I'm here to speak today about the opportunity to create a Ucluelet Community Fund, and I just refer to the illustration that's in page 23 of your package. I've spoken about the opportunity to create a Ucluelet Community Fund at past meetings of Ucluelet societies, and thought that I would bring this idea back to you, as I know you're about to begin your budgeting process, so just wanted to provide you with a bit more information. Community fund is an endowment fund that's for a specific geographic area, and it can be open to all donors so that it can pool donations from many sources. It can create a means of donors to give back to the community, and with the purpose of enriching lives for Euclutians. With the Barclay Community Forest income, I think there's a really unique opportunity to both address some priorities that the community has right now, but also to pay that forward to future generations to ensure that lasting contribution to Ucluelet priorities. If Council was to budget an initial gift, that donation would come to the CBT. It would be pooled with other endowment funds, so we're currently managing 8 other funds, over $1 million in total, and that's in addition to the CBT Canada Fund, which is $17 million. So all of those funds are pooled with the investors. They're all invested in fossil fuel-free portfolio, so it's really in keeping with the climate priorities that the district has. And then each year, the income from that endowment would be returned back to the district. And depending on the size of that initial gift, it could be contributed to the granted aid program, it could be returned to general revenue for the district, or it could also be granted out through CBT granting committees. Say if it was a small amount and so you didn't want to structure another committee or another process to oversee that, it could be addressed within the CBT. Most recently, the District of Tofino created a community fund, and that was a way of creating a legacy for Councillor Baird, who had spoken about that desire as a campaign aspiration. So the District of Tofino and also Tourism Tofino provided those initial gifts, and they came to the CBT, and then we've since advertised that as a sort of a current campaign on our website, and other folks have joined in making contributions. So many community members have stepped up. I think it's an opportunity in the future for folks who'd like to either recognize a community member or their legacy, make a gift in memory of someone in the community. It can be an established place to pool those donations. And as I mentioned in your letter, it's also a unique tool to allow philanthropy to play a role in the recovery in the case of a disaster or an emergency within the district. And so having that fund already created can allow folks from away who may wish to support Ucluelet in the rebuilding or restabilization after something like an earthquake or another disaster to make that contribution in a really streamlined. It's part of already having an established response mechanism. The Ucluelet Community Fund would be recognized on the CBT website, so folks could make donations. They would be charitable tax donations, and the district could choose to continue to make contributions in addition to donors if you so choose. There is a small cost recovery fee that the CBT does take annually, so that's 1% of the income, and we usually suggest to donors that we could expect 6% over the life of a fund to be provided back. So that's what we found with the CBT endowment, and so I just offer that as a suggestion. When I'm working with donors, I often talk about sort of an 80-20 rule, where folks would give 80% of their proposed gift to establishing a long-term endowment and 20% as flow-through, so that you're addressing sort of current needs in the community. And I think with the Ucluelet Community Fund, that's perhaps a different situation for you folks to consider, but to just suggest that as a way of thinking about how you might want to structure your that return to the community. I think that's probably all I have to say right now. If you have questions about the opportunity, I'm happy to answer them now or to speak with councillors or staff as you work through the budgeting process. And mostly want you to know that the CBT is here to work with you as a partner, and that there really isn't one way of establishing a community fund, but it's a dialogue that we can have through the budgeting process to create that lasting legacy from what right now is a huge gift to the community.
Thank you, Rebecca. Any questions? Councillor McEwen?
Thank you for that presentation. It was a very interesting read, and I did have a few questions. When you say that the funds from us would be pooled with the others, is it still sort of kept separate so that you know how much everybody is contributing and how much interest is being earned by the investment?
Yeah, most definitely. So we have a specific bookkeeping software that allows community foundations to allocate income, returns, and expenses proportionally to all of the funds that are held. And that fund statement or fund information would be available to the identified fund manager at any time.
Go ahead.
A couple of other questions. You said that the interest would be given annually, so it doesn't just sit and grow with the funds. It is divested back to the district.
Yeah, that would be the idea, that the funds would be, the income would be returned to the district each year. If it's a small amount, you might want to leave the returns in the fund. You don't necessarily have to withdraw them, but so it just depends sort of what scale of a fund you want to create.
And last question, it states that the funds are overseen by a local advisory committee. Would that be, in our case, council?
It could be definitely council, yep. And in the District of Tofino case, we actually have sort of left that open for now because it is quite a small fund. And so I foresee that for the first few years, they might sponsor some community neighborhood small grants in the community, and then see as it grows how to scale that up. So I think that's one of the things we could discuss.
I'll just say thank you, because we have had this conversation before and I'm a huge supporter, and of course with our community forest when we're looking at some of those funds in a legacy and such. So I'm really glad that this is being talked about right now. Very timely. Thank you.
Anything else? No, thanks, Rebecca. I know that you've brought it up, and we'll look forward because there's that the big what if, what to do with the community forest fund is definitely something we're looking forward to. I think we have a lot of dreams and aspirations, and hopefully we can kind of find the right balance. So this is a great starting point. Thank you. Okay, welcome Marcy from the Alberni Clackwood Child Care Action Plan team. You've come solo today. You usually come in a pack. You usually have a partner with you.
No.
Yeah, welcome.
I'll just wait for Joey to load the presentation. I'll adjust it so. There we go. So thanks for having me today, Mayor and Council. I'm here, yes, with my consultant hat on today. 1/3 of the Child Care Action Planning team. The other individuals that I worked on this project were Maggie Hodge-Kwan and Tracy Smith. All three of us took this opportunity to approach the regional district in the the fall of 2018 in order to apply for UBCM grant funding to produce this needs assessment. All three of us being former early years coordinators and knowing that there's a big need in our communities around childcare. So seeing that need and really seeing that, an opportunity for our region to come together in order to come to a comprehensive plan on childcare and really assessing what needs we have in the community. So we were successful in our grant application and commenced the project in spring 2019 when we received the funding. I get to point instead of using a clicker, so it's kind of fun. So our project entailed a variety of different approaches. We had an inventory of childcare spaces, which was a mandatory piece through the UBCM funding. And it entailed an Excel spreadsheet. So we had to go through an Excel spreadsheet, speaks to each one of the childcare providers in the region, and had an opportunity to interview each one. So in addition to the surveys and the additional focus groups and open houses that we conducted, we had this opportunity to speak to each one of the childcare providers to ensure that we had a really fulsome overview of what they were experiencing in their communities. Additionally, we had a policy plan and bylaw review for each one of the communities in the region, including the nations, really looking at what kinds of bylaws, what kinds of zoning were contributing to and or hindering childcare provision in the communities. We also looked at OCPs, comprehensive community plans, and other such plans throughout the whole region. Our information was really filled out by the Regional Parent Survey and our ECE sector survey. So those individuals giving us some really good anecdotal experience and additional information on how much they're paying and what impact that has on our communities and the families. Following that, we filled in any of our information gaps with focus groups, open houses, and targeted interviews. So just a couple photos here of our West Coast open houses. We had a bit of a different approach for the West Coast versus the Alberni Valley. On the West Coast, we recognized that families, especially those that are more vulnerable, those of children with special needs or any other smaller demographics in our area, did not have specialized services. So we were not able to do specific focus groups. Instead, we did targeted interviews with many of those families, and we hosted 2 big open houses with families to gather general input. We also did focus groups with service providers. In the Alberni Valley, we were able to do a variety of different focus groups, filling out our information around the barriers and challenges that families from our Indigenous families, any Francophone families, or immigrant families were facing. So what we found was across the region, there was a pretty big deficit in terms of our childcare space capacity. The West Coast, actually, we had 1 space for every 3 children existing in licensed childcare spaces. For the 990 children in our region from ages 0 to 14, that really did translate to a major challenge for local families and communities. Our key findings, not surprisingly, these didn't vary across the region. We saw that our key space needs were infant and toddler, as well as before and after school care. Parents were significantly barriered as to where and when they could access childcare. So just the flexibility of spaces, the hours of opening being between many cases 8:30 to 4:30, didn't match up with work hours. Additionally, for our region, that puts parents, especially those that are working in the tourism industry or anything other than a Monday to Friday, 8 o'clock till 4 o'clock job, which we know there isn't very many, at a pretty big challenge for accessing services. Added to this, we saw that childcare was a tremendous economic impact on our families and our communities. So not just the families paying for the increased cost of childcare, but also for our communities losing valuable individuals and very well-trained staff. Especially here on the West Coast, we saw that many of our higher educated individuals were not returning to work because they couldn't find childcare. Added to this, the early childhood education sector, which I'm just going to refer to from now on, hopefully as ECE, because it's a bit of a mouthful for me to get around, is in a bit of a staffing crisis. They require a lot of education in order to do the demanding job that they do, but they do not get adequate compensation for the work that they're performing, especially not if you're looking at having to go to school and pay down student loans. Go ahead. So we had a variety of different recommendations, and these are further broken down in your report. You'll find those from page 37 to 39. These recommendations really focus, especially for the provincial government, around policy. There's a variety of different policy interventions required in order to see both the needs in the ECE sector as well as for families met. One of the pieces that we saw a lot of opportunities for was the implementation of the $10 a day childcare plan, which has seen pilots across the province in the last year and will be further implemented this coming year. We also talked quite a bit about examining the licensing regulations because these can pose very large barriers for centers opening. There was a little bit of a balance to be sought around space creation funding as well as operational funding, because at this point there is absolutely no incentives for operational funding, and many centers just don't have the capability to make that happen. And then the rest was really around looking at ensuring that there are some incentives for individuals to enter the ECE field. Local government, we really were recommending that you assist in the advocacy for some of these points to the provincial government. I think that that's a key role of our local governments. Additionally, looking at those partnership creation opportunities, participating in these kinds of planning processes moving forward, and really looking at any of the policies, zoning bylaws, and or pieces of support that you can build into your OCPs in order to see this sector strengthened within your communities. And for our community agencies, we just talked a lot about the opportunities that we saw within the report that our communities really pointed to in order to create spaces and promote partnerships throughout the region. Thank you. So in conclusion, this really is a bit of a crisis that we saw an opportunity to address, both in terms of ensuring that there is an increased number of quality childcare spaces within our region, our communities, as well as to strengthen the childcare sector moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcy. Any questions for Marcy? Would you, since you're giving us some, it's a nice summary. Does the ACRD send the findings to the province, or is it just something that you guys kind of keep in-house?
We will be sending the report and all the findings to UBCM and the Ministry of Child and Family Development.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. And and that $10 daycare that the current provincial government's been talking about, we know it's needed, and I think they're trying to make some headway with that. But it's nice to see that you made it the first line item in your recommendation. So.
In terms of the economic impact to communities and individuals, that plan is really built on the economics of people returning to work, paying taxes, and it really does. We really saw validation for that plan within the project.
That's great. No, we'll be referring to your report probably again in the future, as we're fortunate with the new elementary school and early childhood center that all this data will definitely be usable. And thanks for what your group is doing, the three of you. Thanks, Marcy. Oh, sorry, Councillor McEwen.
Would it be helpful for our staff to write a letter of support for the $10 a day childcare program to both the MLA and the MP?
Absolutely, and this council has endorsed the $10 a day childcare plan in the past when we've come to council for that, but any additional support is welcomed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Welcome, Bob Hanson. WildSafe BC Pacific Rim.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to provide an overview on the WildSafe BC 2019 program for Ucluelet and the larger region. I will provide an overview of the community support that's so essential to a functioning program like this and its effectiveness. I'll talk very briefly about the mission, and I'll give a little brief overview of this year's wildlife activity up to this point, and talk about or illustrate examples of how the mission's been approached, and the primary tool being collaboration to achieve education and community solutions. For myself, I've been in various capacities over the last 20 years, and my work has revolved around understanding our relationship with wildlife and how we can coexist, and how to meet that forever challenge of how do we share this landscape now and in the future. The WildSafe BC program is one way of approaching that set of challenges, and it's made possible for our region through the really strong and generous support of all of these partners that made it possible to run a 7-month full-time program this year. Excuse me. So I'll get right into some specifics. This year I've come to think of as the year of fruit and lack of salmon. It's really has been a remarkable year. There's still bears out there right now. The last reports were just a couple of days ago, and I'll illustrate how different that is from past years. We've also had wolf activity as usual. 2 serious incidents involving attacks on dogs that led to the death of those dogs, and cougar activity in most of the communities in the region as well. So in terms of bear reports, up until the numbers that I acquired here on November 15th, we were at 120 reports. I believe now we're up over 130. So we've more than doubled last year's reports. Cougar reports down a little bit, but definitely activity in multiple communities this year. Wolf reports are up slightly. So this is where you can really see how different this is from past years. If the red bar is this year, the red bars, and as you can see in most of the previous years, going back to 2016, the peak of activity is sort of late summer. And then if you look at the green bar, that's typical for the past several years, is the activity starts to drop off into September and decreasing in October. And in the last 4 years, there were 0 reports in November. So for us, this year, looking at the red bar, we had a spike in the spring and then decreased in late summer. But then starting in late August, the activity started to go up, and it just kept going up. September, October, and now that red bar for November is just about the same as October's. So, and tied that primarily to a real incredible crop of fruit all throughout the region. So there was bears in fruit trees in everywhere that there was residential areas this year. So Port Albion, Salmon Beach, Macoa, every community in our region had at least one bear, and in the case of Tofino, they had at 1.4 different bears hitting fruit trees. And then as the fruit crop waned, then bears moved on to accessing food and garbage, compost, freezers, breaking into sheds, and that sort of thing. And the other part of that is the salmon pitcher. So incredible absence of chum returns this year, all up and down the coast. And I think that's likely tied to this late season persistent activity. So the bears are really searching, trying to put on calories out there. So this is looking at November this year, and remember in the previous years going back to 2016 there was 0 reports in November. So I mentioned collaboration is the key approach of the program, and I won't go through this, but these are all entities that are actively collaborating with on a regular basis to deliver the program, and it's really great. There's so much support, and working together we are really getting traction on a lot of issues. And I won't go through these numbers too much, but it shows the various means of trying to get out and engage with people, whether it's online through Facebook or out in the campgrounds with the campground operators, or at the markets, or at the BC Goes Wild for Wildlife weekend of event at Thornton Creek. So here's what some of those activities look like. In the classroom, that picture on the left, that session was minutes after a bear walked by the door of the classroom. So really had the attention of the kids. They were very engaged. And then outdoors, actually getting out in our green spaces in our communities with the kids, which is always fun, and learning how to spot wildlife sign and look at that green space as providing the needs of the animals that live there. The door-to-door and bin tagging. So the bin tagging involved going out the night before garbage pickup and putting little warning educational stickers on any cans that are left out the night before pickup, which is contrary to the bylaw and contrary to the Wildlife Act. And it's very educational. I've really come to know our communities very well, driving every single street. So I did 6 surveys in Ucluelet and 10 in Tofino. And I want to commend the community in doing so well on that front. There were surveys where there was nothing out whatsoever, and in most cases, or the worst case scenario, it was 3. So it was really encouraging. The results were not nearly as good in Tofino. And door to door, this is a block party thanks to CBT Small Community Grant at Millstream. And it was great. Just had a whole afternoon to connect with people and talk about the situations that they were experiencing. And as many know, there's still bear activity out in Millstream, so lots to talk about there. And Yuki Days, a really good response there. That's just a great way to meet a whole bunch of folks and have lots of conversations. And the BC Goes Wild for Wildlife Weekend. Over 300 people participated in that. And this is, I really like this picture because it gives insight into those collaborations. So there's Dave and the Enhancement Society, Carl for the National Park, Jean is doing education for over 30 years out there, the Rain Coast Education Society, and Barb for Wetland Stewards, and found that people really, really seemed to appreciate what was being provided over the course of that weekend. Like, people would come and spend an hour or even 2 hours and have long conversations, ask lots of questions, and were able to really take advantage of all of these resources, all the knowledge and experience that these people and organizations provide. So great, great collaboration. And collaborated on a number of occasions with the Wild Pacific Trail Society. Again, a real natural fit there, and lots of connections made. We were gifted wolf pelt for educational, to use in an educational way. And given the cultural and spiritual sensitivities around wolves and for New Chalnoth peoples, we sought permission from the New Chalnoth Elders Advisory Group, and after some discussion, they did approve that. But first there had to be a cleansing and blessing ceremony that Levi Martin provided there. But it was great. They supported the idea that it's important for residents and visitors to appreciate how important wolves are in their culture and spiritual beliefs. Worked very closely, thanks to Brent, I think saw come in, and the Conservation Officer Service. We all worked very well in our individual roles, myself in education and outreach, flagging issues that were persistent, bylaw following up with education and compliance, and then the CO service coming in and bringing that extra weight to things if required. And we were able to resolve some chronic repeat offenders in terms of having garbage out all the time. The subsidy program was able to pay for 50% of 15 of the bear-proof carts and 2 of the composters and 7 electric fencing installations using funding that we applied for through the ACRD. And this is what some of that looked like. That bear went by that composter 2 days after we put it in and built the fence and didn't give it a second look. He just kept going. Their last composter was destroyed by a bear. So, thanks to the collaboration with the waste management companies, Sunbird and Ucluelet Rented, cost sharing on these educational decals that started putting out on bins, together with chains and carabiners to allow bins to be latched and made secure. And in the right-hand case there, the decal goes on. People now have an ability to keep it secured and prevent what happened on the left. And there was one bear that was shot this year after someone opened the bin and encountered a bear in the bin. I think installed around 45 decals and chains and carabiners, and hope to do much more on that next year. And community talks training for Jamie's whaling station staff. And bear spray demos. And electric fencing demos. It's a real handy little portable system that you can whip up in 20 minutes around like a fruit tree. Signs, so the highway signs and posters and such for the campgrounds. And collaborated closely with Ucluelet and Toquat First Nations this year. And in Atatsu, they really did a remarkable job after a rocky start in the spring. They really got on their bins and kept the community clean. They did a great job. And as the bear showed us, fruit is a significant issue. So there is an effort afoot. The Community Food Initiative group will be applying for funding, and hopefully there'll be a regional fruit gleaning program next year. And did have good support from volunteers, and thanks very much to the volunteers. And next year, really hope to launch a similar program, similar length, full-time program. Hope to have electric fencing loaner program next year, and there is an initiative being discussed right now of a possible pilot project to develop an Indigenous Wild Safe BC program in this region, and hope to hear about that in the near future. So thanks very much to the district and to all of the supporters of the program, and I hope we can count on support again next year.
Thank you for that. Any questions?
Thank you for that presentation. It was a really good read as well. And in your report, you state nine bears were shot and killed this year. And I find that number shocking. Could you tell us where those bears were when they were shot?
Yeah, so one in Ucluelet, 2 out Millstream Way, 1 in Atatsu, 2 in Tofino, 2 confirmed in Tyestanis, possibly 3. And yeah, and the season's not over.
So just to follow up to that, why is it we don't hear about these bears being destroyed? Because I think it might shock some people into being better citizens.
Yeah, I did mention it in the last Westerly article, and I did also on the Facebook page that I maintain for the region, for the program. Yeah, it could be, I'm not quite sure how to approach that. The information's out there, and it's certainly, in my interactions with people, I certainly relay it. It really showed us this year that phenomenal fruit crop, where when they moved off the fruit, they really highlighted where our challenges still exist, where we really need to tighten up. That the fruit brought them into town, and then once they're in town, then it's very easy to move on to what's the next easiest thing.
Councillor Hoare?
More of an operational question. If you're aware of a bin that is not latched and is actually, at the moment, incapable of being latched structurally, who do you report that to?
I would go back to the supplier, and yep. If it's, it can be simple, like just before I came to the meeting today, I replaced a chain and a broken carabiner in Tofino. So if it's something simple like that, it's a very quick fix. If it's more structural damage, then that's need to talk to the supplier.
I have a couple quick questions. Is your funding established for 2020?
The regional district actually is this very encouraging development, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
But the operations manager has put a request to have secure 5-year funding in her O&M budget that would be allocated to this program, and it would cover a portion of the operational costs of the program. It wouldn't cover all the costs, but a significant portion. And so she's requested $2,500 a year for hours, and it was $5,000 for the subsidy program, and I requested another $5,000 to run a subsidy program for the other areas of Area C, so Port Albion and all out those way, and she's put that in her budget request as well. So if that goes through, those elements will have secure funding. The rest I need to raise through requests from all of the partners that are showing up there, and any new partners that I can bring into the program.
We're obviously having an impact, and I appreciate what you're doing, and hopefully, keep us posted on the funding models, and it's easier when it's spread across 12 organizations rather than the hands of one. So I'm happy to hear the ACRD supporting you.
Thanks very much.
Quick question though, do you test electric fences? I know you've loaned out tests. Do you sometimes go
Yep.
to, you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And yeah, I've done that a few times where people they had an electric fence that they built, and it just didn't seem to be working properly. Usually, with a tester and a quick look around, you can often find the problem pretty quickly and resolve it. It tends to be fairly straightforward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 3 correspondence items here. 9.1.
I would like to move that staff write a letter of support supporting the right of Canadian libraries to access digital content for our communities.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks again. We missed the date, but thanks for bringing that to our attention. 9.2, Alberni Clackwood Health Network Member Recruitment 2000. I'm going to think that's 2020, but it says 2019. Councillor McEwen?
I asked that this be put on the agenda because I would like to remain on the Transportation Action Table. I served on that table last term for 4 years, and we're the ones that brought Wheels for Wellness to the coast, which up until 4 years ago only went as far as Port Alberni. And we were the ones that got the BC Transit study done, which has now led to the fact that we will have a bus service here on the coast in 2021. So I would like to remain on that table. They meet very infrequently, maybe 3 times a year, or as needed.
Well, it sounds like you have a pretty good track record, so I would support that you would continue on for 2020. Is there a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Councillor McEwen, for putting your name in the hat, and thanks for doing what you're doing there. In 9.3, Reeve Point Strata Plan 1020 Tai Terrace. You clue it. And Mr. Boyson, do you want to speak to this one? Or are you just clearing your throat?
My apologies, I'm doing that a lot right now. So this is just an inquiry that came into staff, and I guess unless we get further direction from council to make any changes, we're going to not make any changes to the process we've been doing with when it comes to the program that was implemented regarding extra additional charges for getting commercial water meters in. So unless we get other direction from council on that, I think we just want to make sure that we're consistent moving forward. And I don't think we had any reasons that we could understand how to make an exception for this particular situation. So, but open to feedback from council on that. Thank you.
Okay, any feedback from council? Councillor McEwen?
Since these charges have already been charged and transferred to their property taxes, that's close to $5,000, and so I feel it would be a hardship for the district to waive those fees, because then that $5,000 would have to be paid back.
Okay, Councillor Cole?
I concur with Councillor McEwen.
Okay. And for me, it's almost 2 years ago, and it's hard to go back a little bit. If it was a bit more, if it was 2 years prior, perhaps we'd have that discussion. It's a little bit late, so no action required. Thank you. Okay, information items. Kennedy Hill. Okay, no comments. Councillor Cole.
I was fortunate enough on December 5th to attend the EOC for the morning portion of the session with staff and the chief to do a little bit of refresher of training, and that was lovely and really well attended. It was a great morning, and I understand the afternoon was just as exciting. I spent that afternoon with the mayor and Mr. Boyson at the Barclay Community Forest, meeting with the partners, speaking about their upcoming initiatives and things that they're working on. Some really exciting stuff going on there. We had a Christmas party on Saturday. I'll let somebody else talk about how fabulous that was, because it was excellent. What a great venue. So good. And Government 101. We sat here yesterday with grade 8 and 9 social studies classes So it was nice to get their input and a bit of their point of view, and hope to do it again soon. That covers it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McEwen?
I was also at the grade 8 and 9 social studies yesterday morning. And funnily enough, the grade 8s were much more talkative than the grade 9s.
Very true.
Much more talkative. December 4th, I attended the Wild Pacific Trail meeting. They produced their stats for the year for the counters on all the sections of the trail, and the yearly total so far is 695,269 people have walked any of the 5 sections of the Wild Pacific Trail this year. 695,269. Pretty impressive. And Tanya gave a total report for her education participation. And for 2019, she did 2,121 walks. And the Discovery tent saw 1,656 people stop by for information from her. She's also produced a great 2019 education season review, and I believe they're going to ask to be a delegation to present this to council in the near future. And the Christmas party was fantastic. It was the first event at the Ucluelet Brewing Company, which is the former church at the top of the hill. And we just found out last night that there will be a second event there this Friday for the Pacific Rim Whale Festival fundraiser, the Christmas Sizzler. It was originally scheduled to be held in Tofino, but due to some glitches, we needed to find another venue. So it's going to also be at that location on Friday night. So hope to see a lot of people out to that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kemps?
I just want to give a huge shout out to the citizens and our businesses for a very successful Midnight Madness on the 29th. The town was just a hubbub of activity, which was great to see and a lot of fun. Just a few reminders. The community lunch is tomorrow, starting at 12:30 at the UCC here in the main hall. And thank you to Richard Norwood and Dustin from the Blue Room and Ian Riddick for helping putting the food all together. So that'll be a great turnout for tomorrow. Also tomorrow, unfortunately, we had to cancel the sail past, so due to low participation, unfortunately. But apparently there's still a couple of vessels making their way around starting at 7. And on Saturday the 14th, we have our Santa breakfast, which is a fundraiser for the daycare. So that starts at 8:30, and Santa will be arriving at 9. And yeah, the fundraiser at the Whalefest fundraiser at the brewery on Friday the 13th. So tickets are available at Murray's also. So if you need to get a ticket. Other than that, I've just been going to some PAC meetings and DPAC meetings, but nothing really to report.
Thank you. Councillor Hoare?
Apparently, I need a ticket to the Whalefest fundraiser on Friday before I run karaoke. I was also at the Wild Pacific Trail meeting, and I have to say that education report, I'm really hoping they do bring it to council because there's some really great information in there. I would like to thank the community for their support of my Reverse Advent initiative that's been going really well. Chris at the Food Bank on the Edge has been really thrilled with the amount of things that have been turning up in the bin. Also, I've sort of, we're kind of having Groundhog Week this week because the last one that I came up with, which was treats for the kids, I've just been leaving up and all the girls have been talking about it. So if you had a favorite treat as a kid that you always asked your mom for, next time you're in the co-op picking up your paper, pick that treat up and throw it in the bin, because all the things we were putting on the Reverse Advent were staple items and not Pop-Tarts or Zoodles or whatever it was you craved as a kid. So thinking about Food Bank on the Edge, once you have had breakfast with Santa and told him what you need, or taken your children or your grandchildren to do that, Stuff the Cruiser is happening at the co-op from 11 to 2. So come on by, and they will have lists of the things they need, and it will probably be a lot of the non-food items because we've been trying to cover the food items with the reverse advent. So laundry soap and dish soap and toothpaste and shampoo. But they'll actually have lists, and so you can go shopping for them on Saturday.
And thank you, Councillor Hoare, for actually keeping that conversation alive. You've been very active on social media and keeping that going, because that all adds up quite quickly. Thank you. A couple other shouts. You talked about the luncheon tomorrow. There's a couple people in the background that are advocates, and just because we're being recorded, they'll say, why wasn't the names announced? You have the three prominent ones, but I want to do a shout out to Julie Baird and Lilia Noel. They're in the background, kind of really pulling those chefs together. So there is a little team of them doing it. Also, we attended the Fireman's Ball a couple of weeks ago, which was a big thing, and I apologize. The Fireman of the Year was?
It was Evan Hauser.
Thank you. So that's an important shout out to them. It's a wonderful group of 22 or 25 volunteers, and hearing the chief confess his love for his new girlfriend was quite. There was no secrets now out in public how he feels. So it was great. So it's one of my top events. Just a real true volunteer fire department where the majority of the guys are not paid for what they're doing and the amount of time they're devoted to it. Sorry, Donna. Yeah, it's the high school one was an interesting one because Councillor Cole came in thinking that she was going to walk away with this new initiative, and then she walked away understanding that there were some young girls in the group that would like to perhaps look at a youth. How do they participate in the fire department in general? So I think Councillor Cole is going to be working on that next year with the chief, and I look forward to hearing more about how do you get participation in some of the community initiatives, and the fire seems to be something that's so she loves challenges. So we'll wait for you to come back with something on that file, because just trying to get that group to participate at some level is important. Mr. Boyson and I did we joined the Seaview Seniors Society yesterday. We went to just their monthly board meeting and just trying to support them in the background as they are, have future plans of hopefully having an expansion in the future. We just wanted to really extend that if they have questions or just to come to us directly. And I think that Mr. Boyson going with the planning staff, answering some questions that they may have or needing some data. And the community forest, since Mr. Lyons in there, who needs glasses, it looks like. It's neat because the community force has been a big, it's left a lot of good funds for their two communities right now, and they're taking a bit of a switch now where sustainability, they're being proactive with an old growth strategy. They're being proactive about some creek restoration, not the creeks that were damaged from their tenure, but from the 70s and the 60s logging practices. So they're trying to really focus and come up with a model that they'll be sharing with us probably at the AGM about a sustainable, as Rebecca was talking about sustainability for money-wise, they're trying to come up with a strategy, a sustainability for forest as well as some of the creek restoration plans. So I look forward to seeing what the group come forward. And that's all I have to report. Okay. 12.1, check listing. Any questions? Councillor McEwen?
I think I know the answer, but it's page 163, about halfway down, urban systems. I believe we got a grant for some of this expense through the mayor to staff.
Through the mayor, so that those particular items, there's a range of products or projects that Urban Systems is supporting us on. So it actually doesn't indicate which particular project that is, but I don't believe those ones are connected to grants. Those are connected to some of our projects that are going to be on display tomorrow night at the open house for Peninsula Road and the Village Green area.
I'm going to say at the end. Okay. Anything else? Okay. $12.2, 2020 council appointments. That means we survived our first year, and congratulations to council for making these afternoon meetings, and I think we ended up on top, and this is our last one. But I was kind of giving thought for 2020 what that looks like, and for myself, there was some conflict stuff in my schedule and personally with attending the ACRD meetings for 2020. So knowing that we're all quite busy, I did approach Councillor Cole, who said that she would be able to be the main contact for the ACRD in 2020 and giving her some, different exposure. And so I'm looking forward to that, with Councillor Kemps being the alternate. And everything else remaining the same. What was the appointment that we just made for you today?
It was the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network Transportation Action Table.
Okay. So, Mr. Rotenberg, perhaps we can just have that added on there under her appointments, please. And I'll continue on with my other appointments with the Coastal Community Network. It's quite quiet, but we do talk a couple times a year. And the Barclay Community Forest. Are there any objections to what you guys see? Okay. Councillor Horsey.
I'm wondering about the Central West Coast Forest Society. Isn't that on there?
No, that's just
I
like
thought
the rest
they-
of the societies. It's just it's not an appointment, but you're continuing on to go there as a liaison.
My understanding was that they needed a letter of appointment.
From, okay.
Yeah, it's in their bylaws, but they are revising their bylaws.
Okay, well, we can revise that once we get that information. And if there's anything else that you may hear, because I don't think the aquarium needs anything from us, do they?
No.
So let's just, if they do need something, well, we can just revisit that at another date. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, Councillor Kemps? Yeah, go ahead.
Move recommendation 1 that Councillor Cole be appointed as representative to the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board, ACRD, and Councillor Kemps be appointed as alternate. 2, that Mayor Noel be appointed to the Ucluelet Health Center Working Group. Can we do?
I think we're not, yeah, I
Okay.
don't think we're going to agree
I
to
was
it all.
just wondering if Joey's going to say something. Number 3, that Councillor Cole be appointed to the ACRD West Coast Committee and ACRD Long Beach Airport Advisory Committee. 4, that Mayor and Council be appointed as Council liaisons in accordance with Appendix A to this report. And 5, that Councillors Cole, McEwen, Kemps, and Hoare be designated to serve as Deputy Mayor in accordance with Appendix A of this report. And I'll add the... And number 6, the addition that Councillor McEwen be designated to serve as a representative to the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network Transportation Action Table.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, into 2020 we go. Legislation 13.1 zoning bylaw amendment for 1178 Coral Way. Mr. Gregg, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a zoning amendment for, as you said, 1178 Coral Way, and also a development variance permit as part of this application to allow a detached cottage instead of an attached secondary suite on the property. Just briefly, I'll highlight a couple of points in the report from our planner, Mr. Toogood. Essentially, a couple of highlights about a detached secondary dwelling, or the accessory residential dwelling unit is the lovely term, which is very common in municipalities to use that term for what's often thought of as a cottage or carriage house. It offers some privacy and independence, which is a bit different from a secondary suite. It's not within the house. It is detached, and so we do hear interest in this from time to time, in that it provides a little different kind of housing, but it is still definitely secondary to the main house. It can't be there on its own, and it's generally smaller than the main house as well, like a secondary suite. And so the report highlights that really the appropriate setting is one of the considerations. On larger lots, it's easier to respect neighbors' privacy, that sort of thing. You know, if it was a two-story building looking over the backyard, you can imagine that would be a concern. So really anticipating the impacts on neighboring property owners. Those are some of the sort of general issues that come up with these kind of accessory dwellings. And that but in this case, it is a large lot, that it appears to be well placed, and there is a public process that would be following this to allow neighbors or others to be commenting before council makes a final decision on either the rezoning or the variance. So the zoning amendment that's being proposed is we already have the accessory residential dwelling unit in our as listed in our zoning bylaw as a use that is generally accessory to some commercial and industrial properties. But the amendment would, within the residential, the R1 zone, would basically add it as follows: that that on the property, accessory residential dwelling unit would be permitted as a secondary use to the principal single-family dwelling located within a detached accessory building on the same property, provided that the single-family dwelling does not contain a secondary suite or a bed and breakfast. So it's one or the other. You could have a suite, or you could have the cottage. As I noted as well, that there would be a variance in this case. The building in this, as you can see in the plans that are attached to the application, that the cottage dwelling is also with a building that has a two-car garage that's attached to it, and currently the limit on an accessory building is limited to about 600 square feet. So there's a variance that's would be required for this proposal to go forward. The other question or note is that this is something that has been discussed more broadly in general. The looking at the residential zones, there's some complexity to amending zoning regulations broadly throughout the community. Really, it triggers the need for community input because so ensuring that you have a bit of a system to look at what are the impacts on neighbors. And one of the things we've discussed is before putting it into, if this were a use that were being considered more broadly within the zoning and not a site-specific zoning like this one, having something like a development permit with guidelines to mitigate things like privacy of neighbors, height, setbacks, amount of green space surrounding and buffering those uses. So at this point, while this current zoning amendment does not at this point create a sort of community-wide housing alternative to add into the zoning, could be seen as a little bit of a pilot, where this is the sort of first an applicant has come forward. We've had some others who've inquired about this sort of thing, interested in having the cottage instead of the suite for what they wish to do on their property. So this certainly is worth, staff feel this is worth considering. And as I mentioned, it would go through a public process going forward. And I'd say the other question, council doesn't need to necessarily wrestle with all these heavy questions, answer them today, as whether we want to name these, if we are going forward, the surf shack or the coastal cottage or the rainforest residence or whatever we need a term to stick with this, or whether we stick with the more robotic sounding accessory residential dwelling unit. But beyond that, if there are any questions, I certainly could answer them. I'm not sure if the applicant is here to add anything, if I missed anything, but they may not be.
Okay. Any questions, Councillor McEwen?
Thank you. Through the mayor to staff, on Appendix A, which is their actual letter, on page 176, it states that this is for long-term rental only. How is that monitored or policed or ensured?
So through the mayor, as that definition that I read out that would be added in would allow it the accessory residential dwelling unit on a property only where there is no bed and breakfast or secondary suite. So that short-term rental, it couldn't be combined on a property with the short-term rental within a bed and breakfast use. We actively monitor the rental of short-term accommodations. So either we get a complaint, or if they use any of the online platforms, we're likely to see that and are our rate of identifying them is we're told, extremely high for communities because it's relatively small and our bylaw officer is good at identifying where are the properties and recognizing them. So, so I think that really is the mechanism, is that if it popped up and was being advertised, we'd become aware of it, and it would be an enforcement, an education and enforcement matter at that point.
So the garage space is larger than the dwelling space, and the dwelling space is only 645 square feet. I assume that two people, it's just, there's a washroom and everything in the garage. Is there a potential of the garage space that's larger than the living area to then be split and become another dwelling altogether?
Through the mayor, that would not be permitted by this zoning amendment. It's for one accessory dwelling unit. So there is, as you've noted, there is a second, it's an outdoor shower and washroom on the corner of the garage. We see this sometimes, particularly with surfers, or as much washing down gear and wetsuits and whatnot. But that is separated. It's off of the garage. If the conversion of the garage to a dwelling, that would require a building permit. We do from time to time hear about buildings that are converted without permit, and again, that's an enforcement matter. That this zoning amendment would really just allow the one cottage.
I know Councillor McEwen asked a question. I'm going to just rephrase it a little bit. I'm supportive of this. I think that there's no secret that I think that we need to move on with secondary dwellings on properties. We need to start getting more people onto these lots. But the person could, I know it says, the letter says that's long-term renter, but the owner could live in the primary residence and could do a nightly in the secondary suite.
Through the mayor, on this property, the way the zoning is set up, there would be no secondary suite, there would be no bed and breakfast. So the main house, if you will, if they're going to have this accessory residential dwelling unit, the cottage,
Right.
on the property, then that is only permitted if there's no suite and no bed and breakfast, no nightly rentals happening. So it's basically all long-term accommodation.
Okay. No, I think I know that in 2020, I believe we're going to be in the line item on the budget of actually having this, because this is under new construction, but I know there's a lot of parts of the community that have large lots that would like to have this ability as well. So, I think it's a great report. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of these into 2020, 2021. I think we need to start getting with the times and encouraging secondary dwellings. And what did you call it? So we're gonna have a little name game of what it could actually be called.
Well, there's three of them in the report that were out there. We're debating whether it's the coastal cottage or the surf shack or the rainforest residence. I think we're open to other suggestions.
Okay, it's cute. I like it.
What we want to stay away from is the secondary suite, the detached
Yes,
secondary
yeah,
suite.
for sure.
The building code treats a suite as its own thing, and this really is another smaller secondary dwelling. Most municipalities often refer to them as accessory residential dwelling units. That's a little dry, but that works too.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just jealous of a garage that's bigger than the place you live in, right?
That's when you don't have any kids. You just show up and use the washroom in your garage and you walk in. Okay, we have a couple recommendations here.
I will move that the District of Ucluelet zoning amendment bylaw number 1259/2019 be given first and second reading and advanced to a public hearing.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I will move that council give notice of its intent to consider issuing a development variance permit to vary the following regulations within the zoning bylaw number 1160/2013 for the proposed construction of a detached accessory building containing a garage and accessory residential dwelling unit on the property at 1178 Coral Way as follows. A, to increase the permitted size of the accessory buildings under section R1.4.2 from a maximum combined total of 60 square meters, 645 square feet, to a maximum of 122 square meters, or 1,310 square feet.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Okay, I guess you're going to be on the mic still here. So 13.2, temporary use permit for 1861 Peninsula Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just briefly again, just I'll review a few of the highlights of the report. The property of this is the Thornton Motel property. It is currently within the CS5 zone for tourist commercial. Motel is one of the permitted uses, which really restricts the accommodation within the motel to a non-residential use with a maximum length of 30 days. And this request that is coming from the Thornton Motel, which is owned by YFN Resorts and Accommodations. They have an agreement to lease the property to Ucluelet Harbor Seafoods, who are requesting the temporary use permit for the basically residential seasonal accommodation use for employees of UHS. So there are 17 motel rooms, and as noted that it would be for longer than 30 days, and really that's what the use that is being requested on their temporary use permit is. The report notes that it is a central location, so for employees it would certainly be easy access, block away from the fish processing facility on Cedar Road. And there are, if the, this seems to be something that's being brought forward by the two parties, and it is something that staff certainly would see as having some merit, and noting that it is subject to public comment. I will note that the conditions that have been drafted on the report, on page 196 of the report, there are those conditions that would be applied to the temporary use permit really require that a manager caretaker be resident on the property, overseeing the accommodation. That this is for staff accommodation working for for employees of the permittee. Also condition around noise, basically quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Identifying that there will be no cooking in the individual units. They're not set up for the cooking. That goes on to say sort of microwave and like an automatic shut off, like a tea kettle would be fine. But sort of hot plates and other additional cooking facilities are strictly prohibited according to the permit. And just also noting that having a regular inspection by the fire inspector would be a condition as well. And that other than that, I can certainly answer any questions of council, that the applicants are here as well. But I would just note that there is the requirement for notification, so that has been completed, so that this, before council makes a decision on issuing the temporary use permit, that providing an opportunity for public input today would be appropriate. And with that, I just ask if there's any questions.
Councillor Cole?
Is there a common kitchen area in the office area or something where people actually can cook? Because if you're living 24/7, I'm just wondering if there is going to be accommodation made for that.
I think because there's going to be probably some questions from staff, does the applicant maybe want to take some questions and maybe go up to the podium if you don't mind? Okay, if you don't mind. And I will open it up to the public there if you have any questions as well, okay? No, it's all good. This is, it's all good, Dan.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dave Dawson. I'm the General Manager for Pacific Seafoods Canada, and we can operate the Ucluelet Harbor Seafoods plant. Thanks, Bruce, for putting that forward for us. The thought is there's a downstairs area next to the laundry room that we would turn into a common kitchen. We've looked at that. We've talked to the owners, and for the 3 years we have some cooking facilities installed in there, so you use a common, ovens, stoves, fridges. There are fridges in most of the rooms, so they'd have a common area to cook and hang out. And it's in the back of the building, not in the front of the building. To address your issue with cooking in the balconies, we don't have a problem writing that into the agreement. You brought up Trappa. We do have a temporary use permit at Trappa. There is, we'll call it the NIMBY program there too. Some people spoke against it. We originally wanted 26 units there. We got 13. But we're having a difficult time finding people that actually want to come and live in trailers. We're also having a difficult time finding suitable sewage treatment for there, and that's why we haven't gone forward with it yet. The Thornton Hotel, we approached the owners. They were receptive to a 3-year deal with us, and we think we can attract a better, a larger workforce with better living conditions instead of having trailers down at Trappa. And there's any other questions you have? Trappa we don't own. We rent Trappa. We've made many attempts to buy the property. One thing about putting housing down there is no sewer. There's no sewer facility down there for us right now. It'll be quite an expense at our cost or the city's cost to put sewer down there to put proper housing there. That's an issue. I think to address your issue with noise, these people do work hard. They work 12-hour shifts. They work, if we bring them in from out of town, we're going to require them to work 6 days a week, so there's not going to be a lot of time to hang out and party. I think when people are on holidays, they're more inclined to have a few drinks and have a good time. These people are going to sleep because they're back up at 7 o'clock in the morning for a 12-hour shift. We've heard rumors of bringing in foreign workers. We do have foreign workers in town. You probably met some of the Fijians in town. This is for people. We're first of all going through our outreaching in Canada here as far back as Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick to bring in workers from there. They've worked in the fish plants back there. They're out of work now. A lot of the seasons back there were 12-month seasons. Now they're 45-day seasons. So there's a lot of people reaching out to us for work as well. We did bring a gentleman in as a production manager from the East Coast this year, and he's got a lot of people wanting to come out here and live, but they won't come out here and live in a trailer. They've been pretty clear. So.
And
if there's any other questions, we're happy to answer. Jonathan's here. Ben, the general manager, UHS is here, and we're here to answer any questions.
go ahead, Matt. You can ask a question.
I live right across the street.
Yeah.
It's 4 and people went to work. What happens to log up people there and that. So how can that not happen on the street?
Well, we will have an on-site manager, no different than a hotel has a manager there, to patrol stuff like that. Noise. There's going to be noise written in the temporary use permit. There's going to be a requirement for us to be. I haven't read it. I'm sorry, Bruce is away. Is there a
Well, at the end of the
day.
day with noise, and I can, Matt, Pacific, I forget who was your CEO that came, or your CEO that came up.
Spencer.
So Steve came up, and they spoke. I spoke a lot of your concerns, in a working meeting with them about, the community's not going to want to see rain gear hanging off of porches, all the rest of it. They don't want to see that either, right? They know they're in the middle of the town. They know they're under a microscope, and so it's the best interest for the tenant to actually put the best foot forward for the community, because the community has a lot what you're saying, and they're committed to trying to get to the next stage of finding that employee that would actually come here. And he's right, you're not going to find a 40-year-old person, family of 2, to come to you to do a 3-week shift to live in an RV. So this is a great opportunity for them. Yes, noise. We already have noise bylaw rules, and you've been across from the Thornton Motel, and frankly, I was one of those logging crews back in the day that used to live in the Thornton. The Thornton Motel has, for a long time, had a lot of working crews there staying on the monthly basis, and I'm thinking that you probably didn't have too many complaints about it. So I'm pretty comfortable knowing that in this, there is a temporary use, and under the temporary use, we have the ability to revoke things if things were to end up being.
Quite different when it's a logging crew, spending about
Yeah. But again, it's a temporary use, and we do have rules, and I think you're bringing up all the valid concerns, both you and Dan. You're directly, we're not, when we look at the hedge in front of it, it's off the, it's not in plain sight. I guess your guys' living room, it's your plain sight, but again, I think that we just have to go down a path about the fact of the community really supporting this organization, getting to the next stage of trying to bring possibly another 35 workers to the community, which if some of them like the town, they may become residents. They may bring families to town. So there's a bigger part to that. Then the other part of that I see is also you have the Okluathot trying to, this is a good win for them. There's a win for a lot of different parties. And so, go ahead. Well, again, motels, there's already this would be the second motel, they're empty this time of year. So, for giving, it gives a transition of some of these older, I'll call it older motels, but it's not older, it was just half rebuilt. So don't take offense, Jonathan. But I think that the fact is, it really gives them the ability to go to the next stage in life for this organization. Go ahead.
Just to help kind of smooth it over a little bit. So the chamber runs the lodge. UHS rents rooms off me, and there was a little hiccup, but we solved it like that, and there's been no more concerns. Support employee housing thoroughly, and I Thornton, and it was rented out monthly. As long as there's a strong manager on site, as long as the kitchen facilities, like I understand the new units, they just have the little bar fridge and the sink. As long as that kitchen is built prior to the people moving in, the communal kitchen, and there's a strong manager living in the suite. I know the older units have full kitchens, so that's not a concern. My concern is like stuff hanging out, gardens, then yards not being kept up. Like those are as long as that is, as coming into town, the Thornton Motel still looks something that should be part of Ucluelet.
That'll be maintained.
And it's maintained.
We want to see turn into it.
Right? Like I don't want it to see it look like there's rain gear and coolers outside and everything's kept clean. There's a very strong management team. I'm totally supportive.
Oh, sorry. I've got a couple questions. I'll get back to you, Dan. Councillor Cole?
Having heard what everybody said and realizing that everybody sort of wants the same thing and all has the same vision of how it needs to be lovely, I'm wondering what the hardships or deficits are in creating a temporary use permit that is only for a year, in the concept of it's easier to not renew than to take something back should things go differently than what everybody is wishing to happen? Question mark.
I think there's going to be an expense.
That's a question.
Have to put in
Steph.
for the kitchen. You know, you're going to have to amortize that over 3 years. We've looked at that. Over 1 year, it might be expensive. We're spending a lot of money on that plant this year, and we need to take a good run at bringing some full-time people in here. I mean, there's no secret that it's very difficult to run these plants without people. I mean, Ben's struggle every day is people. And without getting some people in this plant on a long-term basis, we don't know if it's viable moving forward. You know, we've talked about other options. This company we've met with the mayor. This company is very supportive of shoreside processing. And we want to take a good run at this and see if we can make it in this community. And we think for 3 years it's something that we're willing to support.
Councillor McEwen?
Thank you. I was going to ask the exact same question, but once I heard that you were wanting to bring people out from the Maritimes, I can see how somebody wouldn't want to move here for just 1 year. They'd probably like a 3-year commitment. And then I have a question as well. Are some of the rooms larger than others? Like, could some rooms accommodate a family as opposed to just a couple?
The 4 separate units are 2-bedroom units that could have a family. We're hoping it's a stepping stone, like the mayor said. You know, we're hoping people come out for a couple months, decide they like it here, and move their family out and start looking for a place to live. There's no work back east for them right now. You know, there's no shortage of people applying.
Councillor Cole?
Sorry, but to be clear, people aren't coming out here for a 3-year contract, or they're not held to a timeline that is associated with a temporary use permit.
We want the 3 years so that we can plan our future.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Okay, you guys, any other questions? Sorry, back to the public here. I did promise Dan, go ahead. You had a couple questions? Yeah, just if you don't mind. We got to keep it official. Name and address. I'll let Matt get away with that.
Yeah, me again. I know I need a haircut too, so missed my last appointment there. So I'm heartened to hear that there will be regular inspections, and it does need strong management. I mean, if it's going to fly, I know the company wants it to fly. That they're going to move down below with the communal kitchen, and that's probably where most of the socializing will take place. So in the communal kitchen, people have a beer after work or whatever. So I do think that the regular inspections are important. I don't know what would happen. I mean, I don't know what the future of the industry is. Nobody really does, I guess, given stocks and giving world markets and that. So I appreciate the predicament you're in. I personally could support it with, not that I have the yay or say in the matter, but with a strong management that does have the authority to, evict promptly, and that those people may or may not be able to move out into the community. Housing prices are something completely different. So I realize you're up against the wall with it. So I just hope that if it's passed, I will do my best to cooperate and make sure that, for my part, that it does work, and but also complain dearly if it doesn't. So I know that the council too is trying to resolve some of these thorny issues. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, Dan. Any other comments from the public? No. Go ahead, Jonathan. For the applicant? Okay. This is...
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and those that have spoken.
Just your name there.
My name's Jonathan Cross. I'm from YFN, 1861 Peninsula, Thornton Motel. Just briefly, I guess, wanted to address a few of your comments and explain why we're where we are today, and why we're interested in doing this, and how my sort of connection here with the Seafoods began. Our group have owned the property since, well, a little over a decade. It hasn't quite worked out for us as we had hoped, and it's been hampered by the fact that we did have a fire, and since it reopened after the fire, we haven't really been able to make a going concern of the business. We've been looking for alternatives. One of the options was to sell the property, but based on its current earnings, that's not an ideal situation either, and it's probably assessed to us, to a potential buyer, at less than we paid for it 10 years ago. So one of the things I think that municipalities are well aware of is that if motels face destructive competition or difficult circumstances, their product slips, and ultimately you end up in almost a worse situation than the potential, where the customers and it just degrades. You don't have to charge less, and the property just deteriorates. To a certain extent, that's what has happened, and Pacific Seafoods have committed that they're going to invest in the property and help maintain it and keep it safe. So I think that's positive. I want to just explain a little bit about the hotel itself. We're talking about small hotel rooms. It's a unique property. It's actually got a house on it. The building closest to the entrance to the Ucluelet is actually a house. And then on the building closest to the fire hall, it's actually an apartment building. It has 4 apartments in it, 2-bedroom apartments with full kitchens, living rooms, 1 and in some cases 2 bathrooms. So it is already, in fact, a bit of not quite what possibly you're envisaging as your main concern of people living in small hotel rooms. Granted, it is not suitable for cooking, and they're going to address that. I think it was mentioned about the large tree buffer. From a hotelier's perspective, I would remove that, but I think we would undertake to keep that, because I think it as this change of use, that would help buffer the property from the street. Other than that, it was mentioned about barbecuing. I think we were going to be pretty strict about that. Dave, we've talked about that. I understand the concerns there. The other thing that I want you all to be aware of is at the end of the lease, we want the property back. So we want it back in one piece. We want to be able to use it again. So, and obviously it's a motel. So the most likely use for the motel is a motel. And so it's in our interests as property owners to make sure that the property is maintained. The chief had to leave, but he said, we want to be good citizens. We want to do our best. But we need try and find another use for the property. Rain gear and clothing, I think that was in the temporary use permit that we wrote, or certainly came up. It was one of the conditions, I think. And as far as noise, I've been in the hotel business 30 years. There's lots of noise, and lots of police, and lots of domestics, and lots of parties, and lots of disputes. I actually think that in this case, this may well be a quieter occupant than some of what we do have. But in the lease, there is some strict notes about noise, odor, partying. We're not interested in being a bad citizen. We're trying to find a use for our property that enables us to keep it in reasonable condition in the main street of Ucluelet. Any questions for me?
I think Councillor McEwen might have a question.
I don't know who best to ask this of, but through the mayor, potentially to staff. The manager that's put in place, will that be someone that's put there by Ucluelet or by UHS?
That'll be a UHS employee.
Anything else? Oh, sorry, Councillor. I need a different chair.
Just a quick one, and we've sort of mentioned it in passing, having worked at the plant. Do we have a plan for all that gear? Because if you're building a common kitchen, that's great, but I have had my fair share of fish plant gear, and as we all know, it doesn't smell the prettiest. And I'm just wondering if there's somewhere, I don't know, at the plant, or whether there's a space just to maybe kind of keep that storage not on all the balconies. And
Jonathan, do you want to speak to that?
So it's definitely we don't want it on the balconies, we don't want it outside, that's for sure. We're actually in talks at the moment about figuring out how the laundry is going to be done, because we actually want to continue to do some laundry from that building. We have a full commercial laundry there that we use for Waya. So the plant's been talking about doing some of their laundry there, in which case I imagine that would happen there. But they also have a laundry at the plant, so we would work with the tenant to figure out what was causing the minimum nuisance. We're cleaning white sheets and pillowcases, so we'll be talking about that.
You don't want them smelling like cake, I guess, but... Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Jonathan, for... Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just if you don't mind getting the mic one more time, Dan. Dan, can you just get... Sorry, it's just a process.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think for us, especially across the street, it would be really important to then maintain the buffer of trees, and because that really helps, and that would be a really, I think, favorable consideration for us. I mean, they might all die, but but yeah, that would be important to us. I think that it remain. It's a good noise break and visual.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Dan. And I think Jonathan just mentioned they have no intention of removing any of that, and they're just, yeah.
Yeah, we commit to leaving that subject to an act of God, I guess, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, then, well, we have a couple recommendations.
I will move recommendation 1, that council provide an opportunity for public comment on this item, and 2, that subject to public comment, council authorize issuance of temporary use permit 19-06 to allow residential and seasonal accommodation for up to 3 years in the Thornton Motel located at 1861 Peninsula Road.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. We look forward to seeing you guys move forward on that one. Okay, thank you for being here and answering the questions straight up, and it's good for the neighbors to hear that, and we'll just go forward, and hopefully you fill it up in the near future here with some out-of-towners and that love our town. What are we at here? 13.3 procurement and disposal policy. Donna, were you going to speak to this, or is it pretty cut and dry for us? Okay, if you guys are okay with it? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor McEwen.
On page 205, it mentions a joint purchasing group. And through the mayor to staff, just wondering how often that is actually used or done or procured that way.
Through the mayor, granted I've only been here for a year, I haven't used it as of yet.
And my second question is, there used to be a form that was sent out with business license renewals, so that the business license applicant could specify the services that they offered. Just wondering if that is still a process that's used by the district to procure services through the mayor to staff.
Through the mayor, that's a different process that happens, I believe, in April when the business licenses renew. It's not directly attached to this particular policy.
So I guess it's just so that the district does procure services from businesses that have valid business licenses, I'm guessing.
If they're here in the district of Ucluelet, they do require a business license to do business here. This policy, though, is more about procurement, and we do belong to a couple of trade agreements, and so we have to abide by certain rules of fair and open and transparent procurement policies. So.
Okay, thank you. And there are a couple recommendations.
I'll move that council adopt the proposed procurement and disposal policy number 3-1200-5, and to that council appeal the procurement and disposal policy number 3-1200-4.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Any other business?
For you, there is.
For me, there? Oh, yeah, okay, yes, thank you. I was going to make a couple announcements, but I guess I could just do that now. There's an open house from 4 to 7. I really encourage the community to come out and take a look at what the planning department's put together regarding the Peninsula Road. And is there anything else going on outside of the Peninsula Road plans?
Through the mayor, I can speak quickly. So it's also the Village Green area on the waterfront in front of the Municipal Hall is also an area that we're looking at for proposed redesign. This is a very early discussions, but just looking at getting some community feedback on some proposed ideas for that, and also the future of Peninsula Road in general.
Perfect. So come on out and see that. That's going to be wonderful. There's some great plans and get some feedback, positive or negative. I do want to, I don't know whether it's appropriate right now, but maybe I'll just throw it on the table here. With this backyard cleanup here, obviously there's a bit of a problem with accessibility to the landfill that the ACRD may have since they look after the landfill. I know Councillor McEwen, you are going there tomorrow, and I just want to put the bug into Councillor Coles. There is no green drop-off in either location, either communities, and maybe they need, because there is a lot, when you see the shattered garbage, there is a lot of just green waste that's put out in the backwoods. And maybe if there was drop-off locations in both communities, that might be one way to reduce a little bit of the waste. So I'll just leave it with both you two and into 2020 and what you come up with. Give you some, I like this, just give you the idea and let you run with it. So it's just good. One thing there, it just comes up for me every year, because my wife's always telling me about it, is the, oh man, I'm going to ask for you guys' support on this one, is Frank Jones, that 1983, today's the anniversary by coincidence, is when that helicopter crashed, the RCMP one, and we actually have a Frank Jones Field memorial, which I think we'd be all embarrassed how the memorial looks. So I think that would be nice to, I would make a request that staff provide an update with the Frank Jones Memorial and perhaps some options going forward, how we can rejuvenalize that so it's actually modern and probably respected.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Thank you for being so supportive. They're so great. Anyways, it's just that we just need to support that stuff. That was a big day for some of us when we were kids, so. Oh, geez, call it a question? All in favor? Thank you very much. I was getting to the finish line. I'm like that a little bit sometimes. Okay, I'm going to open it up. Any other business? Okay, none heard. Question period. Any questions from the audience? Mr. Lyons? Nothing? You good, Matt? Okay. That's relative, right? Anyways. Just your name and address there. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That was some letters to go with the temporary use. Did you not see them? Okay, they're probably up here, up at the front here, but they were just some letters of support. And not. One not, but support, yes. Anything else? No? Okay. Thank you. I'll get there, okay? Still in training. But, okay. Did you have something, Michelle?
No, just calling up Kathleen to see if she had anything.
Did you have something, Kathleen? Okay. Sure? Okay. It's still early. It's not dinner time yet. It's all good.
But the reason we can't use our right hand to vote is because we have to hold down this button when we talk. It's very frustrating, which is why we're all looking like this and like this, because you have to hold this button down the whole time.
We're getting it. We're getting it. Slowly but surely, all right? Okay, anything else? No? Okay. So, just before we go into closed session, I just want to wish everybody, a Merry Christmas. This is our last one for the end of the year, and I hope that 51% of you are happy with what we're doing, and that and we're happy to be here, and all the best over the holidays. So, okay. So, procedural motion to move into camera, that the meeting be closed to the public in order to address agenda items under Section 91G of the Community Charter. Can I get a
I will second that.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And we'll just take a quick 5-minute recess here.